The storm screamed across the frozen land. Snow fell in endless waves, covering the ground like a thick white blanket. The wind howled, sharp as knives, cutting through every sound. Yet in the middle of this terrible storm, one small voice could still be heard. It was the sound of a child. The child was not human. Her skin glowed faintly under the pale light of the storm. Her large black eyes were filled with tears, and her small body shivered as the icy wind bit into her thin clothes. She was alone, lost in a blizzard that seemed big enough to swallow the whole world. She cried, calling for someone, anyone. Her small hands clutched at the snow, but the snow only burned colder. Her breath came in fast clouds. She had been walking for hours, but every step only led her deeper into the storm. Around her, strange shadows moved. Shapes in the snow. Were they rocks? Were they beasts? She could not tell. Fear grew inside her chest. She screamed again, but the storm carried her voice away. The world was empty, or so she thought. Far away, hidden by the snow, heavy footsteps crunched closer. Slow, careful. A figure appeared in the distance, almost invisible in the white blur of wind. At first, the child thought it was another monster. She pulled her thin arms around herself and cried harder. The figure grew closer. A tall shape, 2 legs, broad shoulders, wrapped in torn frozen gear. It was a human. His face was rough, half hidden by frost and an old scarf. His eyes were sharp, scanning the storm with a soldier's focus. His body was tired, his steps heavy, but he kept moving. And then he stopped. He had heard her. The human bent down, looking through the storm. His eyes narrowed. There she was, the small alien child almost buried under snow, shivering and weak. For a long moment they only stared at each other. 2 beings from different worlds. 2 strangers. The child's fear grew. She had never seen a human before. She thought he was dangerous. His size, his strange face, his rough clothes, everything about him was frightening. She tried to crawl backward, but the snow was too deep. The human did not move closer at once. He simply watched her. His breath came in white clouds. Then slowly he knelt down. He placed his hand on his chest as if to say, "I mean no harm." The child blinked, confused. Her tears froze on her cheeks. She coughed, her small body shaking. Finally, the human moved forward. Carefully, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal, he stretched out his gloved hand. His voice, deep and rough, broke through the storm. "It's all right," he said. The child could not understand the words, but she felt something in his tone. A strange warmth. She hesitated. Then, weak from the cold, she reached out. The human's strong arms lifted her gently from the snow. She was so light, so fragile. He held her close against his chest, wrapping his old coat around her shaking body. The storm roared louder, but inside his arms she felt warmth for the first time since the blizzard began. She stopped crying. The human stood again, holding the child tightly. His eyes searched the storm, always alert. He knew they could not stay here. The storm would kill them both. Somewhere there had to be shelter. Step by step he pushed forward through the snow, carrying her. His boots sank deep, but he kept moving. Behind them, the shadows in the blizzard moved again. The beasts were watching. The child pressed her face into his chest, hiding. The human whispered something, his voice steady, calm. She could not understand his language, but she understood his heart. He was saying, "I will protect you." Hours passed like a nightmare. The storm never rested. But finally, in the distance, the human saw the broken outline of a shelter, an old structure half buried in the ice. With the last of his strength, he reached it and pushed inside. The walls shook under the screaming wind, but at least it was not open sky. He placed the child down gently on the floor. Her face was pale, but her eyes were still open. He crouched beside her and pulled a small fire starter from his pack. Sparks lit, a small flame grew. Warmth returned to the air, weak but real. The child watched the fire, her eyes wide with wonder. She looked at the human again. This strange creature from another world. He had no reason to save her. Yet he had. The storm outside growled like a living beast slamming against the shelter. The walls trembled. The human looked toward the door, his jaw tight. Something was out there. The child felt it too. She shivered, not from cold, but from fear. For now she was safe in his arms. But the night was long, and the storm was not the only danger in the frozen land. The blizzard howled, and the shadows outside grew closer. And so their story began. The storm outside raged like a wild beast. Snow slammed against the walls of the broken shelter, shaking the metal sheets and frozen beams. Inside, the human sat near the small fire he had built. Its orange glow danced on his face, making him look both fierce and tired. Beside him, the alien child huddled close, wrapped in his old coat. Her large black eyes stared at the flame as if it was magic. She had never seen fire so near, not like this. The warmth touched her face, melting the frost from her skin. But even with the fire, fear still sat in her heart. She looked at the human, this strange giant who had saved her. His clothes were torn, his hands were scarred, his breath heavy. He was not of her kind. His body looked rough, dangerous. Why would he help her? Why not leave her to the storm? The human noticed her stare. Slowly, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small package. He tore it open and held out a piece of dried food. The child flinched at first. She did not trust him, but her stomach ached with hunger. Carefully, with shaking hands, she took the food. She sniffed it. Strange smell. Different taste. Still, she put it in her mouth. The flavor was rough, salty, but her empty belly welcomed it. She ate slowly, never taking her eyes off him. The human gave a small nod as if to say, "Good. Eat. Stay strong." The fire crackled. For a short while, silence filled the shelter. Only the sound of the storm outside and the child's soft chewing broke the quiet. The human sat back, resting his tired body. He pulled out a small flask, drank, then closed his eyes for a moment. The child watched him. She thought of the monsters outside, the shadows moving in the snow. Without him, she would already be gone. The thought made her chest tighten. She whispered something in her own language, a soft sound like a prayer. The human opened one eye and looked at her. He could not understand the words, but he felt their meaning. The storm roared louder. The shelter shook. The child gasped and crawled closer to him, her small fingers clutching at his sleeve. He looked down at her. For the first time, his hard eyes softened. Without a word, he wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. She pressed her face against his chest, listening to the strong rhythm of his heart. It was steady, powerful, like a drum beating against the chaos outside. Her breathing slowed. Her fear lessened. For the first time in days, she felt safe. The human stayed awake, his gaze fixed on the broken door. He could hear it, the faint scratching, the heavy steps in the snow. The predators were still out there, waiting, watching. The storm had hidden them, but it would not keep them away forever. He tightened his hold on the child. She was so small, so fragile. She reminded him of someone. A memory from long ago. A face he could barely remember. A child's face. His own family, his jaw clenched. He whispered to himself, too quiet for the child to hear. Not again. I won't lose another. Hours passed. The fire grew weaker. The storm finally began to calm, though the cold was still biting. The child had fallen asleep, her small body resting against him. The human listened to her soft breathing, but then the shelter shook violently. Dust and snow fell from the roof. The child woke with a cry, clutching his arm. He stood quickly, pulling her behind him. His eyes narrowed toward the door. A low growl echoed outside. Deep, hungry, close. The human reached for his weapon, a simple blade, sharp but worn. He held it steady, ready. His other hand pushed the child gently back against the wall. "Stay," he said firmly. She did not know the word, but she understood the command. The growl came again, louder this time. Claws scraped against the metal of the door. The child's eyes filled with terror. The human took one step forward, standing between her and the danger. For a moment, silence. Only the wind whispered. Then bang! The door rattled as something slammed against it. The metal bent inward. The child screamed. The human's grip on his blade tightened. Another slam. Another growl. The door began to tear. The child covered her ears. She wanted to close her eyes, but she could not look away. The shadows outside were no longer just shadows. They were real. They were here. The human stood tall, his eyes sharp, his body unshaken. He was ready to fight, ready to protect. The child's heart raced. She had never seen such courage. Never seen anyone stand against the beasts. The firelight glowed behind him, his figure casting a tall shadow on the wall. To her, in that moment, he looked less like a man and more like something greater. A guardian, a force the storm itself could not break. The beasts growled again, their claws tearing at the door. The human raised his blade, ready to strike. And in that moment the child understood. This human was not here to harm her. He was here to save her. Her fear turned to hope. Her small voice whispered one word in her language. Protector. The storm screamed again. The shelter shook. And outside, death waited in the snow. The bond between them had begun, but their fight for survival was only starting. The night was alive with hunger. Outside the shelter, the growls grew louder. The sound was deep, shaking the frozen walls. Sharp claws scraped across the metal, tearing long lines. The alien child pressed her back against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. The human stood tall in front of her, blade in hand, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. The beasts were here. The first slam came like thunder. The old door bent inward, its hinges crying out. Snow burst through the cracks. The human gritted his teeth, steady and ready, another slam. A hole opened in the door. Through it, the child saw glowing eyes, yellow and cruel, burning with hunger. The human did not move back. He tightened his grip on the blade. His breathing slowed. His body became still, like a hunter waiting for the right moment. The child clutched the edge of his coat. She whispered no, but he did not turn. His eyes stayed on the door. With a final crash, the door broke. A massive beast forced its way inside. Its body was covered in thick white fur, its fangs long and sharp, dripping with saliva. It was larger than any creature the child had ever seen, larger than the human himself. Behind it, more shadows moved, waiting their turn. The firelight flashed against the beast's teeth. It roared, shaking the air. The human moved. He stepped forward with speed, blade flashing in his hand. He slashed across the beast's face. Hot blood sprayed against the snow and the walls. The beast howled in rage, but the human did not stop. He struck again, driving the blade deep into its neck. The child screamed as the beast lunged forward, claws swiping through the air. The human ducked, rolling aside, then stabbed upward. His blade cut into soft flesh. The beast collapsed, shaking the shelter with its weight. The ground trembled. The fire flickered, but there was no time to breathe. Two more beasts pushed through the doorway, their yellow eyes locked on the prey inside. The human stood again, blood dripping from his blade. His chest rose and fell with sharp breaths, but his eyes burned with fire. He pointed the blade at the creatures as if daring them to come closer. The beasts snarled, their fangs flashing. They circled him, moving slow, waiting for the chance to strike. The child crouched low, her tiny hands shaking, her breath quick. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. One beast leapt. The human spun, catching it mid-air with his blade. The steel cut into its side, but not deep enough. The beast's claws scraped across his arm, tearing fabric and skin. He grunted, pain flashing across his face, but he did not fall. He pushed the creature away and lifted his blade again. The child's heart raced. She had never seen such strength. The beasts were stronger, faster, but the human did not break. His will was harder than the storm itself. The second beast lunged. The human dropped low, grabbing a burning stick from the fire. With a shout, he swung it at the beast's face. Flames burst against its fur. The creature howled, thrashing wildly, retreating as fire bit into its skin. The child gasped, her eyes wide. Fire was not just warmth, it was a weapon. The first beast roared and charged again. This time the human did not retreat. He ran forward, meeting the beast head-on. Blade and fire in hand, he struck with all his strength. The blade pierced deep into its chest. The beast screamed, falling heavy against the floor. The human pulled his weapon free, chest heaving, blood on his hands, some his, some theirs. The second beast, still burning, crashed against the doorframe, then fled back into the storm. Its cries echoed in the night, fading into the blizzard. Silence. The human stood in the middle of the shelter, breathing hard. His arm bled, his coat torn, his body shaking with exhaustion. But he still stood. The firelight flickered against him, making him look larger than life. The child stared at him in awe. She had thought humans were weak, fragile, but this human was different. Alone, wounded and still, he had faced the beasts and won. Her fear changed into something new, respect, hope. The human turned to her. His eyes softened when he saw her trembling form. He wiped the blood from his blade and knelt beside her. "You're safe," he said quietly. She did not know the words, but she understood the look in his eyes. She crawled closer, her small hands touching his wounded arm. She made a soft sound, almost like a cry. He gave a small smile, shaking his head as if to say, "Don't worry." But outside, the storm whispered. The beasts were not gone. More waited in the snow. The human knew it. His eyes went back to the broken door. This shelter would not last. He stood again, wrapping his coat tighter around the child. He lifted her into his arms, ignoring the pain in his wounds. The child rested her head against his shoulder. Her heart still pounded, but she felt safe in his hold. She whispered one word again in her language. "Protector." The human walked toward the door, his steps steady, his blade ready. The storm screamed outside, and more shadows waited. The battle was not over, it had only begun. The night ended slowly. The storm still roared, but its power was weaker now. The wind no longer screamed like a beast, only hissed through the cracks. Inside the shelter, the fire had burned down to glowing coals. The human sat against the wall, his blade resting beside him, his arm wrapped in cloth to stop the bleeding. The alien child slept beside him, curled in his coat. Her breathing was soft, steady. She had not let go of him all night. Even in sleep, one small hand clutched the edge of his sleeve as if afraid he might vanish. The human's eyes stayed on the door. He had not slept. His body ached, his wounds stung, but his mind was sharp. He knew the truth, this shelter would not last. The beasts would return, and even if they didn't, the storm would. If they stayed here, they would die. At last, the first pale light of day touched the world outside. Snow still fell, but the blizzard was weaker. The human stood slowly, his muscles stiff. He looked at the child, still sleeping. For a moment, his hard face softened. He bent down and shook her gently. She opened her large black eyes, blinking at the dim fire. When she saw him, she sat up quickly, clutching the coat around her. "It's time," he said. She did not understand his words, but she understood his gesture when he pointed to the broken door and then to the horizon. He lifted her into his arms once again, wrapped her tightly, and stepped into the snow. The world outside was endless white. The storm had buried the ground in thick layers, erasing all paths. The air was cold enough to freeze breath in seconds. But still he walked, each step sank deep. His boots crunched, his body heavy. The child clung to his neck, her small head resting on his shoulder. She looked around with wide eyes, snow stretching forever, mountains in the distance, sky dark with clouds. The silence was heavy, too heavy. The beasts were gone, but the land itself was alive with danger. The human kept his hand near his blade, his eyes sharp, scanning the land. Hours passed. The child dozed in his arms, waking only when he stumbled or when the wind grew too strong. He never stopped. His steps were slow but steady, a rhythm that never broke. At last they reached a frozen river. Its surface was covered in ice, shining faintly under the weak light. The human paused, staring at it. He tested the edge with his boot. The ice groaned, dangerous, but they had no choice. He stepped forward. The ice cracked softly beneath his weight. He held the child tighter, moving carefully across. Each step was like walking on glass. The sound of cracking followed him, echoing across the silence. Halfway across, the ice broke. A sharp crack exploded under his feet. The child screamed, clutching him tightly. He threw himself forward, rolling across the ice as water splashed up from the hole. His legs were wet, freezing cold, but he kept moving until they reached the other side. He fell to his knees, breathing hard. The child buried her face in his chest, shaking. He wrapped his arms around her, whispering something soft. His words were strange, but his tone was calm. She began to breathe slower. He stood again. His legs burned with cold, but he pushed forward. There was no time to rest. The land grew rougher. Tall cliffs of ice rose on either side. The wind funneled through them, sharp and merciless. Snow blinded their path. The human lowered his head against the storm, shielding the child with his body. Step by step, he forced his way through. The child watched him. His face was pale, his lips cracked, his eyes red from wind. He looked like he carried a mountain on his shoulders. And yet he never stopped. She thought of her own people. Would any of them fight so hard for someone not of their kind? Would they carry a stranger through death itself? The answer was no. And yet this human did. She whispered her word again. "Protector." He looked at her, not understanding the sound, but giving a small smile anyway. As night fell again, he found a cave in the side of a cliff. He checked it carefully before entering. No beasts, only stone and ice. Inside, he built another small fire with the last of his supplies. The warmth filled the cave. The child sat close to the flames, her face glowing orange. She looked at the human as he tore strips of cloth to dry his wet legs. His hands were shaking from the cold, but his eyes stayed alert. She wanted to help. She reached for a piece of cloth and tried to wrap it around his arm, where the beast had wounded him. He froze, surprised, then let her. Her hands were small and clumsy, but her touch was careful. He watched her in silence. Something stirred in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. When she was done, she looked up at him with her wide eyes. He gave a small nod, a quiet thank you. She smiled weakly for the first time since he had found her. The fire cracked. Outside the wind howled, but inside the cave there was warmth. There was trust. For the first time they were not only survivor and burden, they were becoming something more. But the human knew their journey was far from over. The land was endless, the dangers many. And somewhere beyond the storm, something greater waited. As he lay back against the cold stone, blade resting at his side, he whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." The child leaned against him, her small body warm against his side. Her eyes closed, safe for now. The storm outside raged, but together they had begun the journey. The cave was quiet, but the silence was heavy. The small fire crackled weakly, throwing shadows against the icy walls. The alien child sat close to it, wrapped in the human's coat, her wide eyes fixed on the flames. She was warmer now, safer for the moment, yet her mind could not rest. The human sat across from her, sharpening his blade with a flat stone. Each scrape echoed in the cave. His face was tired, his body stiff with pain, but his eyes stayed sharp. He was always watching, always listening, as if danger waited outside every moment. The child tilted her head. She had so many questions, but she did not know his language. Still, curiosity burned inside her. Who was this strange creature? Why had he saved her? Finally, she spoke in her soft alien tongue. The words were slow, broken with pauses. "Why, help me?" The human looked up. He did not understand her words, but he understood her eyes. He put down his blade and sat closer to the fire. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he touched his chest with one hand. "Me," he said. Then he pointed to her. "You," the child blinked, confused. The human sighed, rubbing his face. He struggled for words, his voice deep and rough. Slowly he began to speak, not because she could understand, but because he needed to. "I had a daughter once," he whispered. The child tilted her head again. She could not understand, but the tone of his voice pulled her closer. His eyes were distant now, looking not at her, but at memories only he could see. She was small, like you, always laughing, always curious. His lips trembled as he spoke. "But I lost her. My world burned. My people fought. And when the fire came, I couldn't save her." The child leaned forward, her black eyes wide. She did not know the words, but she felt the weight of them. She saw the pain in his face, deeper than the storm, deeper than any wound. The human clenched his fists. His jaw tightened. "I swore. Never again. No more children lost. Not while I breathe." He looked at her then, his eyes sharp and full of fire. "That's why." The child's heart beat faster. She still did not understand the words, but she felt them. She felt the promise in his voice, the pain behind it, the strength that carried him through the storm. Slowly, she crawled closer. She reached out her small hand and touched his arm, right where the wound was wrapped in cloth. He froze, surprised, then looked down at her. Her voice was soft, trembling but clear. "Protect her," she whispered. The human's eyes softened. For the first time, a real smile touched his face, small, faint, but real. He reached out and placed his rough hand gently on her head. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For a short while, the cave was calm. The fire burned steady. Outside, the wind grew weaker. It felt almost safe. Almost. But safety was never real in this frozen land. The sound came suddenly. A crunch of snow. A heavy step. Then another. The human's smile faded. His hand dropped to his blade. He motioned for the child to stay quiet. Her eyes grew wide, fear flooding back into her chest. The sound grew louder, multiple steps now, echoing against the cliffs outside the cave. Voices followed, low, harsh, not the growls of beasts but the speech of soldiers. The human's body tensed. He pressed a finger to his lips, telling the child without words, "Silence." She obeyed, holding her breath, pressing close to him. Shadows moved across the entrance of the cave. Tall figures in armor, carrying weapons that glowed faintly in the dark. Their helmets shone with strange lights, scanning the land. They spoke in the child's language, their words sharp. "Search every cave," one voice commanded. The child must be alive. Find her! The child's heart raced. She knew those voices. They were her people, the soldiers of her own kind. But their tone was not soft. It was cold, hard, filled with anger. The human crouched low, blade ready. He did not understand the language, but he understood the danger. His eyes burned with the same fire as before. He would not hand her over. The child looked at him, torn. These were her people. They were supposed to protect her. But when she heard their voices, saw the way they marched with weapons raised, something inside her froze. They were not here to rescue. They were here to control. One soldier stopped near the entrance, scanning the cave with his glowing visor. The light brushed across the stone, moving closer to where they hid. The child's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but the human's strong hand pressed gently on her shoulder, steadying her. His eyes locked with hers. Trust me, they seemed to say. The footsteps grew louder. The light swept closer. The soldier raised his weapon, ready to fire if he saw movement. The child's hands shook. Her people were so near, yet she felt more fear than safety. She looked at the human again, at the man who had carried her, fed her, fought monsters for her, and in that moment, she made a choice. She grabbed his arm tightly and whispered in her language again. Protect her. Mine. The human did not know the word, but he understood her eyes. His grip on the blade tightened. The soldiers outside drew closer. Their leader's voice echoed again. Find the child. No mercy to whoever hides her. The child buried her face into the human's chest. The fire crackled softly. The air grew heavy. The storm had calmed. But a new storm had begun. This one not of nature, but of war. And in the frozen silence, the human prepared for it. The fire in the cave burned low, a faint glow against the icy walls. The human stood near the entrance, blade tight in his hand, his body tense like a drawn bow. Beside him, the alien child clung to his coat, her wide black eyes staring at the shifting shadows outside. The voices of the soldiers grew louder. Their armored boots crunched against the snow. Weapons hummed faintly with energy. They were closing in. The child's heart raced. She recognized the voices. These were her people, soldiers from her own kind. Once their sound would have filled her with hope. Now it filled her with fear. Their words were sharp, cold, without mercy. Search every cave, one soldier barked. She cannot be far. The human glanced down at the child. He did not know their language, but he understood danger. His eyes were sharp, steady, burning with the same promise he had shown from the start. I will not let them take you. The child gripped his arm tighter. Her small body shook, but her voice trembled with something new. Not just fear, but decision. Protect her, she whispered. The human gave a slight nod. The shadows stretched across the entrance. The first soldier appeared, tall and armored, visor glowing blue. His weapon pointed forward as he stepped into the cave. The light from his helmet swept across the walls, closer, closer, until it fell on them. The soldier froze. His voice cracked like ice. Found her! In seconds, more soldiers rushed forward, their footsteps pounding, their weapons raised. The cave filled with light, metal, and noise. The child gasped and hid behind the human, pressing her face against his back. The human stood tall, his blade shining in the firelight. Alone, bleeding, exhausted, yet he faced them without fear. One soldier stepped closer, his voice echoing in the child's language. Come with us, little one. Your family waits. This human is dangerous. He is not your kind. The child peeked from behind the human's coat. The soldier's words pulled at her heart. Family, home, safety. But his voice was not gentle. It was cold, commanding, like a chain waiting to bind her. The human shifted, putting himself fully between her and the soldiers. He growled low, his blade steady. He could not understand their words, but he understood their tone. He was not about to give her up. The soldiers raised their weapons. Blue lights flickered at the tips, ready to fire. The child felt her chest tighten. If they shot, the human would die. He had fought monsters, storms, hunger, but these were soldiers, trained and armed. Against them, he could not win. Her hands trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at the soldiers, then at the human. The man who had carried her, bled for her, kept her alive when no one else would. And then she screamed, "No!" Her voice rang across the cave, high and fierce. She pushed past the human standing in front of him, arms spread wide. Her small body shook, but her voice did not.
He saved me.
He is mine! The soldiers froze. Confusion flickered in their eyes. The leader stepped forward. What did you say, child? The child's tears burned hot on her cheeks. You left me in the storm. He found me. He fought the beasts. He gave me fire, food, life. He is my protector. The words echoed through the cave. For the first time, the human understood, not the language, but the meaning. He looked at her, his chest heavy, his eyes softer than they had ever been. The soldiers lowered their weapons slightly, surprised. One muttered, "Impossible. A human? Protecting one of us?" The leader's voice was sharp.
Lies, he is using you.
Humans are weak. They only survive by chance. The child shook her head furiously, standing taller, though her legs trembled. No, you did not see. He fought 3 beasts alone. He carried me through the ice. He bled, but he never stopped. He is stronger than you, stronger than all of you. Her voice cracked, but it carried truth. The soldiers looked at one another, uncertain. The human stepped forward now, his blade still raised, his body between the child and the soldiers. His eyes burned with defiance. He did not speak their language, but his stance spoke louder than words. You will not take her. The cave grew heavy with silence. The fire hissed. The wind outside howled faintly. At last, the leader raised his hand. The other soldiers froze. His visor tilted toward the child. You claim this human saved you? The child nodded, her small fists clenched. Yes, he saved me when you did not. I stay with him. The leader's hand lowered slowly. The soldiers lowered their weapons, though their eyes stayed cold. Very well, the leader said at last. For now he lives. But the council will decide his fate. Come, child. Bring your protector. We will see if he is truly what you believe. The human looked at the soldiers, then at the child. He did not trust them, but her small hand slipped into his, her eyes begging him silently. Please, don't leave me. He tightened his grip. He would go not for them, but for her. The soldiers turned and marched back into the storm. The child and the human followed side by side. The blizzard swallowed their shapes, but something new burned in the child's heart. For the first time, she had stood against her own people. For the first time, she had chosen the human. The storm was not over, and danger was still ahead. But their bond was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable. The storm outside faded to a cold whisper as the human and the alien child walked with the soldiers. Snow crunched under their boots. The soldiers marched in silence, their weapons glowing faintly, their visors reflecting the pale sky. The human stayed close to the child, never letting go of her hand. They walked for hours until the white, endless land finally opened to a vast camp built into the cliffs. Towers of ice and steel rose from the ground. Strange lights flickered in the mist. Dozens of soldiers guarded the gates, their eyes turning as the group arrived. The leader raised his voice. We found the child and the human. The crowd stirred. Shock rippled through them. A human, here alive walking beside their child. Murmurs spread like fire. Some laughed with disbelief. Others frowned with suspicion. The child clutched the human's arm. Her voice rang clear. He is my protector. Without him, I would be gone. The soldiers looked at her, then at the human. His clothes were torn. His arm was wrapped in blood-stained cloth, his face hard as stone. He stood tall despite his wounds, eyes sharp, never bending. The leader pointed. Bring them to the council. Inside the great hall, icy walls glowed with blue light. The council sat high on thrones of carved stone, their faces hidden by silver masks. Their voices echoed cold and powerful. You bring a human into our home, one voice said. Why? The child stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. Because he saved me. Because he fought when no one else did. Because without him I would not stand before you now. The council murmured. Another voice spoke. He is not one of us. He does not belong. Why protect him? The child's small fists clenched. Her voice rose. Because he belongs to me. He is stronger than the storm. Stronger than the beasts. Stronger than all of you who left me to die. Her words cut through the hall. Silence followed. The council turned to the human. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning with defiance. He did not understand their words, but he knew their meaning. He saw their faces, their judgment. He stood straighter, blade at his side, his chest rising with sharp breaths. At last, the leader of the council spoke. Then he will prove it. If he is your protector, let him face our trial. If he survives, he may live among us. If he fails, his death will remind us why humans do not belong. The child gasped. No, he is already wounded. But the decision was made. The soldiers dragged the human forward, though he fought them with iron strength until the child cried out. Her voice stopped him. He let them lead him into the arena carved deep into the ice. The arena floor was covered in snow. Torches burned blue flames along the walls. Hundreds of eyes watched from above. The child stood behind the gates, tears burning her cheeks. The trial began. From the shadows, a massive beast stepped into the arena. Larger than the ones before. Its fur was black as night, its fangs like swords, its roar shaking the ground. The human's grip tightened on his blade. His body was weak, bleeding, but his eyes blazed with unbroken fire. He whispered under his breath, words only he could understand. For her, the beast charged. The ground shook, snow flew. The human stood his ground until the last moment, then rolled aside, slashing his blade across its leg. The beast howled, spinning, claws tearing the air. The battle raged. The human moved with speed born of desperation. He struck, dodged, bled. Each hit pushed him closer to death, but he never stopped. The child screamed his name again and again, her small voice carrying across the arena. Protector! Protector! The final moment came. The beast lunged, its jaws wide. The human roared back, driving his blade deep into its heart. The creature crashed to the ground, shaking the arena with its fall. Silence followed. The human stood over the body, chest heaving, blood dripping from his wounds. His knees buckled, but he forced himself to remain standing. He lifted his blade high, his eyes locked on the council. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in awe, others in disbelief. But no one could deny what they had seen. The council whispered among themselves. Finally, the leader spoke. The human lives. He has earned his place. The gates opened. The child ran to him, tears streaming, throwing her arms around his waist. He dropped his blade, resting one hand on her head. His body shook, but his eyes softened as he looked at her. You're safe, he whispered, voice weak but steady. The child looked up at him. Because of you. The hall behind them echoed with voices. Some cheered, some doubted, but none could erase what had been witnessed. A human broken and alone had faced storm, beast, and trial and triumphed. He was not just a survivor. He was a protector, a legend. And though his wounds were deep, his story would spread beyond the storm, beyond the cliffs, beyond even the stars, because humans, they would say, were not weak. Humans were something else. Humans were unbreakable.